Hello, everyone. Dr. Vicki here from the Seeds of Transformation Healing Center in Wareham, Massachusetts. We're going to look at the second week of July 2023, the astrology of that week. It's a pretty active week, perhaps not as active as the next week, but let's take a look and we'll get started. All right, just have some patience with me as I do the technical stuff, as always. A bit of a challenge. All righty. All right, let's see here. Slideshow. Yep. And, okay. All right. Now, we're looking at the week starting. That's week 3. No, that's a little bit too far. A lot happening on that week. But let's look at, we can't jump ahead. Where are we here? Awesome. Okay, week 2. So week 2, I'm calling July 9th, which is Sunday to Saturday the 15th. And Sunday the 9th is pretty active day. We have Mars making inconjunct to Pluto. Inconjuncts require adjustments. And depending on the type of inconjunct, it could either be a mental or an emotional adjustment. And I don't know, personally, I think mental adjustments are easier than emotional adjustments. With mental adjustments, you need to change your mind, look at it from a different perspective, from a more like logical reasoned place. But when you're dealing with the type of inconjunct where we're dealing with from an emotional place, emotions have no reason. So it's a little bit harder. So really those inconjuncts really ask us to die to the old and be reborn into a new relationship with whatever 2 planets are making the inconjunct. And of course, that is more of a Scorpio side inconjunct, where the first type I described is more of a Virgo inconjunct. The thing about these Scorpio inconjuncts is that they, the Scorpio side, the flack that we get is from the outside, it's from society forcing us to make an adjustment in the way we feel about the relationship between those 2 planets, what are those 2 planets symbolize, whereas the Virgo side inconjunct, the need for change comes from within. It comes from that energy of Virgo, where it's like, is this right? Is this perfect enough? Can I improve upon it? So it's much more of an internally oriented. But either way, inconjuncts deal with having to make adjustments. And I bring up the energy of the inconjunct because we do have some significant yods happening in the sky right now with Mars, and then ultimately we'll have them with Venus as well, with the 2 transpersonal planets of Pluto and Neptune. So we will get to it when we talk about it. So we have Mars making an inconjunct to Pluto. This is a crisis-producing aspect that requires an emotional adjustment. So we're dealing with that Scorpio side inconjunct. Humility is required because of social pressure. The start of the disseminating phase of this planetary pair. So we're now in the disseminating phase, and the disseminating phase deals with our ability to join in with society and teach what we know and learn from society. It's a Sagittarius sort of energy of that disseminating phase of any 2 planets. What is society learning from the unconscious desires of Pluto and Capricorn made manifest through Mars? Okay, Mars. The initial Mars-Pluto conjunction, which is a 2-year synodic cycle. Whenever we're dealing with Mars, there's generally a 2-year cycle. Initially occurred back in 2022. Actually, it was 3/3/2022, which happened to be the 3/3 portal. That day, 3/3/2022 vibrated to a 12/3 vibration, which is the Hanged Man. connection to cosmic consciousness. Okay, so through this whole period, there's a need to understand what you can affect and what you can't affect, the wisdom to know the difference, and then a connection to cosmic, to the great cosmic sea, right? That's where the answers lie. Okay, so we had this initial conjunction on that 3-3 portal day in 2022 at 28 degrees of Capricorn. What's interesting about 28 degrees of Capricorn is it is the degree of the Pluto of the United States. So this is part of the Pluto return of the United States. And so we can even see here, as we live in the United States, how we are shifting and moving and making adjustments, and why there's a lot of shadow material, Scorpio, coming up for society to push back against. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Hopefully. Mercury, we also on that day have Mercury make a trine to Neptune. This is a highly psychic time, a flow of information straight from spirit into your head, into your kabasa. Actually, kind of similar to the hanged man energy, right? This can bring on delusional thinking as well, but can also bring spiritual insight. So it a lot has to do with your ego, right? Because we can all have spiritual insight, but that sort of forcing our perspective on people is, I think, part of the delusional aspect that can come from this. And then we also have a last quarter moon with the sun, of course, squaring the moon, the sun being in Cancer and the moon being in Aries. This natural square, this last quarter square, naturally is a crisis in belief. We're not trusting authority, and we're going through the process of individuation. So we're kind of making up our minds for ourselves. Now, this is part of the synodic cycle that began with that very powerful new moon at 27 degrees of Gemini, that was in a very tight square to Neptune, if you remember that. And that was only from, at this point, that was, let's see, 21 days ago. So it wasn't that long ago, but we know how quickly things happen now and how inundated we are with information. And so we can definitely forget just how long ago things were. It wasn't that long ago. On Monday, we have Mars make an ingress into Virgo, and Mercury making an opposition to Pluto. Now, the Mercury Pluto synodic cycle is a 1-year cycle, unlike Mars, which is 2. Okay. And when we get to the opposition, we get to a fruition point. So whatever seeds are planted, the time that Mercury and Pluto conjoined, now we're seeing whatever seed that was, we're seeing the fruits of that. And now the next part, which is the second half of the cycle, is we take the fruits and we distribute it into society, because that first part of the cycle is very much an internal cycle. It happens underneath the radar. And then all of a sudden something pops up and we're like, oh, where'd that come from? Well, we've been working on it this whole time, but now we have the fruit, and now we have to share the fruit of that process. On July 11th, we have Mercury ingress into Leo, gets out of Cancer. And that's, it moves from that very emotional, sometimes withholding energy of Cancer. Cancer really has to chew things over and understand it before they say it, but they generally say it with quite a bit of emotion and feeling. But now we get into Leo, and Leo takes those feelings and creates with them, right? Creative self-expression. So with Mercury and Leo, we will definitely hear more about what people are thinking, what people are creating, and Leo always has to do with the will. Leo is the pinnacle of ego, the pinnacle of will, personal will. What do you want to contribute? What is it that you want to shine? How do you want to shine your light, right? That's Leo. On the 12th of July, the sun makes a waning sextile to the moon. This is opportunities for progressive change. Now, just a few days before, we had the square crisis. you're not going to tell me what to do. And now we come just a few days later to the sextile, which allows us to open ourselves up to new ideas, right? To, yes, maybe perhaps authority doesn't know what they're talking about. Let's work together collectively and see what we can come up with. And that's really the sextile energy, that 300-degree sextile in the lunation cycle. On Friday, the 14th, Mercury makes an inconjunct to Uranus. Mercury and Uranus have a special relationship. Uranus is a higher octave of Mercury. And so when they connect, there is information coming from our higher minds and our higher vibrational states. The inconjunct, however, as always, requires us to make adjustments. So we're going to have some shocking news that requires us to make adjustments in the way that we think about things. On that day, we also have the sun make a sextile to Uranus. This is brilliant, out of the box ideas, right? Illumination. So that can help the inconjunct of Mercury to Uranus, but it could also overwhelm because we're already getting all this information. So there's some balance between getting the information that you need and seeing what you need to do and not getting overwhelmed by the amount of information and the way it comes in, because it tends to come in it's almost like a download, but it's as if you get something encrypted, but you don't have the code and you have to figure out the code, right? Okay. And then on Saturday, the 15th of July, we have Venus make an inconjunct to Neptune. Now, Venus and Neptune have a special relationship. And this is, as Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. So we have within a 2-day period, the higher octave of Mercury and the higher octave of Venus making these inconjuncts to the planets that they're the higher octave of. So there's all of this need for adjustments in the way we think, Mercury, Uranus, and our value systems, Venus and Neptune. Okay, so this week has some illuminations around it. It's somewhat of a struggle. Mars moves into Virgo, so now Mars is rolling up its sleeve. It's no longer in Leo. It gets off its soapbox and it rolls up its sleeves and it gets down to working out the details. So it's somewhat of a transitional week at this time. And then next week, we have quite a lot of things happening, one of which is the nodes of the moon change signs. And Pluto, I believe that's the week that Pluto makes the exact squares to the nodes of the moon as well. So things are, next week, things are more like, look at this right here, boom. Whereas this week is a little bit more of having to reorient and rearrange and make adjustments with the illuminations that you get. So there's still a lot of information coming in, and it's hot. All right, let's see let's go day by day here. So we have Mercury making a waxing sextile to Uranus. Here's did I say, is it Mercury? It's not Mercury. Is it Mercury? Wait, hold on. Mercury, Uranus. Yeah, okay. See what I did? I actually circled the wrong thing here. That's why I confused myself. Here's Uranus at 2157. That's 22 degrees of Leo. And here's Mercury at 22 of Cancer. Of course, when we're dealing with, did I say Leo? I meant Taurus. When we're dealing with Taurus and Cancer, we're dealing with security issues, really. And sextiles open the lines of communication. So we're talking to each other about issues around money, security, values, family, maybe even patriotic stuff, because sometimes Cancer can be quite that energy. So we're opening the lines of communication between the lower and the higher minds. Jupiter rules the part of the mind, the intuitive side, right? The creative side. Jupiter is intuition, whereas Mercury is logic. And so the logical mind and the intuitive mind are having a conversation, and sextiles open us up. So it's a good communication to have. This is part of the Mercury-Uranus synod that began back in March 28th to be exact, of this year, 2023. happened to be a 3811 vibration, which is the Queen of Cups, if anybody's interested. And that occurred at 19 degrees of Aries. So this initial conjunction between Jupiter and Mercury happens in Aries. That was before, a little before Jupiter ended up moving into Taurus, which it's staying for a year. So this energy, the initial intention of these two planets coming together had an Aryan nature, right? And the Sabian symbol for 19 degrees of Aries is the magic carpet of Oriental imagery, the use of creative imagination, the use of creative imagination. Now, Uranus is at 22 degrees of Taurus, as I said, white doves flying over troubled waters, the spiritual inspiration that comes to individuals in overcoming of crisis. And it's talking to and communicating with Mercury at 22 degrees of Cancer. And the Sabian symbol for 22 degrees of Cancer is a young woman awaiting a sailboat, belonging for transcendent happiness in the soul, open to great dreams. So it's about dreaming in a new reality. We create our reality, guys. How we interact, where we put our energy, creates the reality that we're in. And because we're so connected collectively now through things like the internet, we have more influence than we had before. And so instead of focusing on the things that you don't want to see, you need to focus on the things that you want to see. So while the world is at war, we need to start focusing on how we can come to a sense of commonality and consensus. And so we have this energy of Taurus and Cancer, right? So like, yeah, the world's at war, and you said this and you said that, and you want this, and I'm bigger than you, and this and all this other stuff, and people are starving. People are starving. They're starving in Africa. They're starving in the Middle East. There are people starving in America. People are starving because we're not paying attention to the things that are going to keep us alive. Okay, and this is a reminder that that's what we need to do. So we have the energy to actually, oops, I did it the wrong way here. We actually have the energy to move forward on all of this. Okay, where am I? Oh, okay, what did I just do? Oh, that is so bizarre. Oh, hold on one second, guys. I'm so sorry. What did I just do? Oh, goodness. I am so sorry. Oh, I see what I did. I just talked about what happened on the 7th, which is interesting. I said I was going to do the 9th, but somehow I found myself here. But I'm glad I did, because this day, this June 7th, was a 777 portal. And I just did a reading on it. So if you haven't seen the 777 portal reading that I've done, it's called 777 Portal Reading with Dr. Vicky. Check it out, because I talk about this a little bit, but it's very interesting that this came up. All right, so let's go to where I'm supposed to be. I see what I did. I went backwards. All right, forward, the 9th. Let's talk about what I meant to talk about. Mars making a waning in conjunct to Pluto. Remember, I said in conjuncts either have the energy of Virgo or they have the energy of Scorpio. As a waning in conjunct, this is the Scorpio side in conjunct. This is part of the disseminating phase where emotional adjustments need to be made in order to fit into what is socially acceptable. It is also a phase of reaping rewards of your hard-fought journey to be productive, helpful, and a useful part of society. This is part of a synodic cycle that began on 3/3. Remember, I talked about the 3/3 portal, 2022, last year, when Mars and Pluto conjoined at 28 degrees of Capricorn. And the Sabian symbol for Capricorn at 28 degrees is a large aviary. Now, Mars is at 30 degrees of Leo. So Mars is at the very end of Leo. That's a critical degree. That's a critical degree. 30 degrees of Leo, an unsealed letter. The realization by the individual that all thoughts and all messages are inevitably to be shared with all men. It's interesting that there's, that there's so much information now coming out about what happens on January 6th, around January 6th, after January 6th, right, with all of this Trump crazy, you cheated me, it was a fix, and all that stuff, and realize, and of course, those of us who know that he was all BS anyway, and it was just his way of staying in the spotlight and making more money, which he's making money hand over fist, so it's working for him. But ultimately, it all comes out, right? It all comes out in the wash, so to speak, especially if you wash the letter. I guess if you wash the letter, that's not good. But and then we have Pluto at 30 degrees of Capricorn, a secret meeting of men responsible for executive decisions in world affairs. The power to assume responsibility for crucial choices arrived at after mature discussions with those who share power. And then it's sharing executive power, sharing executive power. I don't know what I wrote down there, but it's actually the key word is executive power. So there's this energy of what do we allow to be heard and seen through executive power. Like people in charge are deciding what information is going to be made available. Ultimately, will all be made available according to this. But if we look at the chart on the right here, here's Mars at 29 degrees, and here is Pluto at, well, 29, 25, 29, 25. Here's the inconjunct. And we also see here that Neptune, I did hear Neptune is also making an inconjunct to Mars. Now, the Neptune inconjunct to Mars is a Virgo side inconjunct, and this Pluto inconjunct to Mars is the Scorpio side. But we do have these two transpersonal planets, and these are, you know, you can't get any more transpersonal than Neptune. Neptune in Pisces. And then we have Pluto in Capricorn, which is the height of power. And yet the next sign is Aquarius. And so we have that shift from the power of the hierarchy to the power of the people, right? And then we have Mars here in the sign of the height of ego. So this really is asking, this is a fall. This is like the great ego fall, right? And then Mars moves into Virgo, and Virgo is the energy of, okay, well, maybe I wasn't quite completely right. Now, how are we going to fix it kind of energy, right? So we can see we're getting to this point where we're at and we can even see this in what's going on in Russia with Putin, right? He's the big, strong guy. You can't, there's no way he's got this army. And now we find out that what it's really like what's really going on there. And perhaps he's not as powerful as he thought he was. And the interesting thing about just using those two examples is that Venus here, which is not part of the yod, but is conjunct Mars here. And this is actually the Venus to Mars is a balsamic conjunction. It's right at the end. So it has to do with how we relate to one another and extracting meaning from our experiences. What's going to happen, however, is Venus is going to slow down even more and go retrograde. Mars is going to move on, and they actually don't come back together until next year. I think I want to say January, February, but I'm not sure about that, when they can join again and start a new synodic cycle, which, because we're dealing with Mars, is 2 years, and it's a synodic cycle around how we relate to one another. But we won't talk about that right now. But I do want to point out that Venus is conjunct Trump's Mars, and Venus is conjunct Putin's Pluto. So their charts are being aspected pretty powerfully by all of this. Okay. All right. So Oh, I see what I wrote here. Sharing is inconjunct executive power. So, and this is sharing what you think you know, and executive power coming and saying, hey, that's not true. That's not so we can also see this with what's happening with the government and Biden trying to prevent media companies, social media companies, from sharing information that is not correct, right? So we have that, there's that war going on now as well, and we can see it in this aspect. Okay, let's continue. We also have Mercury make the trine to Neptune, right? Trines are flowing. Trines are lovely, right? They really do help. Highly creative. Imagination is peaked. Part of the Mercury Neptune synod, which began back on the 16th of March this year, 2023, at 26 degrees Pisces, the Sabian symbol. Watching a very thin moon crescent appearing at sunset, different people realize that the time has come to go ahead with their different projects. The keen appreciation of the value of individualized responses to any challenge in life. And the key word here is the fallacy of totalitarianism. So the seed of this Mercury-Neptune conjunction talked about that it's unity in diversity, diversity in unity, and that it's important that it's not just one person's perspective, totalitarianism, right, fascism, but a combination of the influences of all people, right? So very important symbol, especially at this time. So now Mercury is at 28 degrees of Cancer. An Indian girl introduces her white lover to her assembled tribe. Of course, this sounds like Pocahontas, right? Inner rebirth through total acceptance of the primordial values manifested in the human body and its natural functions. So this is the Indian girl, the feminine, the Indian, the indigenous, introducing the white man, the lover of the white man, the uninitiated in the ways of the indigenous, right? And the yang force man, right? To come in, to open him up, and open up the masculine side to the hidden power of our connection with the earth and with the feminine. In a rebirth through, oh, I said that, a return to nature. Return to nature. So with this trine happening, if you want your answers, go out to nature. And I know a lot of you guys are wicked, like completely like inundated with heat, and going outside can be dangerous. So just be careful with that. Of course, I don't have to tell you that. You don't have to listen to me at all, but you guys know, right? All right. So but it's important to connect to nature. So even if you have an indoor, sort of, if it's too hot where you are and you have an indoor place where you have plants or things, this is the place to go. Maybe go to a place that may have that, where you can still stay cool. And it's trine Neptune and Pisces. A fertile garden under a full moon reveals a variety of full-grown vegetables, the full satisfaction of the individual's basic needs. Keyword here is abundance. If we want to have an abundant life, we have to connect with the part of life that deals with keeping us alive and manifest on this planet. And that's what we're connecting here. That's what we're connecting here. And let's see, here's Mercury here in Cancer. This is a United States chart, by the way. I apologize for not having it be just Aries rising. And here's Neptune in the 3rd house. Okay. And we have 3rd house, 7th house here. 3rd house is media, 7th house is law. It's also relationships, contracts, things like that. Be aware of where you're getting your information from. and maybe go outside or go into nature to get the most important information you can get. And we'll look at the last quarter moon, part of the synodic cycle or the lunation cycle that began with that 28, it's actually 27 degrees of Gemini, a gypsy emerging from the forest where her tribe is encamped, reaching out toward participation in a larger whole of mind-structured existence. This is about getting out of your tribe and moving out into the world and connecting with other people so that you can see how other tribes interact and live and find the commonalities between it. The image reveals a period of transition, a clear yearning for a new state of consciousness, and thus for inner transformation. This is a phase of repolarization. And so we are so far apart, and now it's about coming back together. The sun is at 18 degrees of Cancer now, hence scratching the ground to find nourishment for her progeny. I remember I said there are a lot of hungry people out there. The practical concerns with everyday nourishment necessary to sustain one's outreaching activities. In a square to the moon, which is at 18 degrees of Aries, an empty hammock stretched across between two trees, a constructive alteration of activity and rest. So this is a reminder of what really, really counts, right? And so here we see that the moon here at 18 degrees of Aries is in a close conjunction to Chiron in Aries. And of course, Chiron in Aries is the wound of individuality, it's the wound of war, it's the wound of aggressiveness, it's the wound of not standing up for yourself, it's the wound of not being able to define yourself the way you feel that you are, etc., etc. Sorry about that. That was a little racist, wasn't it? And then we have the sun here in Cancer. So sorry about that. All right. Now we have Mars's ingress into Virgo. And the saving symbol for 1 degree of Virgo is in a portrait, the significant features of a man's head are artistically emphasized. The keynote here is the capacity to picture oneself clearly in the salient features and overall meaning of any life situation. The key word here is discrimination. Now, as we look at Mars moving into Virgo, which is a Mercury ruled sign, I always look to see what's Mercury doing? Well, Mercury is at 29 degrees of Cancer. The saving symbol for 29 degrees of Cancer, so this influences the energy of Mars, right, as it moves through Virgo. And Mars is going to be in Virgo for a while. Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, the 29 of Cancer, a Greek muse weighing newborn twins in golden scales, the intuitive weighing of alternatives. Which way do we want to go? Which infants, right? Which infant do we want to feed? I mean, you want to feed all the babies, but you know what I'm saying. It's like metaphorical. Where the potential, what potential do you want to feed? This will say that, not call them babies, right? The psychic function, which relates ego consciousness to the collective unconscious. What we see happening at the very threshold of a new cycle is an inner presentation of alternatives. So we are being presented with alternatives. How do you want to utilize your energy, Mars and Virgo? How do you want to utilize your energy to make the adjustments necessary, Virgo, to improve and perfect, Virgo, right? So this is all, and it all depends on this inner connection. And of course, we have Mercury trining Neptune. We have all these the transpersonal planets are talking to us. And it's time for us. And of course, I know many of you are already listening, so I don't have to give you the lecture. On the 10th of July, we have Mercury making an opposition to Pluto. This is the halfway point of the Mercury Pluto cycle. So whatever was planted at that initial conjunction, and that initial conjunction was at 29 degrees of Capricorn, a woman reading tea leaves. The ability to see the signature of hidden meaning in every occurrence drawing one's attention. This is all intuitive stuff, guys. Now we have the opposition. We have Cancer. We have Mercury at 29 degrees of Cancer, which is the same symbol we just spoke of, right? A Greek muse weighing newborn twins on golden scales, the intuitive weighing of alternatives, opposite the woman reading tea leaves. Pluto has moved past this point. Remember, went into it conjunct, it made a conjunction to Mercury in Capricorn, moved into Aquarius for a little while, remember that? And then moved back in, and now has come back and is now in opposition to Mercury. And so that little foray into Aquarius gave us a little bit of a tea leaf moment to see like what's ahead for the next 20 years. We got quite an eyeful. And you can go back to that period of time and see all the things that came out. But again, we're here now. So we had a little glimpse of what the future holds. Now we're back to where we were. And now the fruit is here. And the fruit is weighing the alternatives. The fruit is that Mercury at 29 degrees of Cancer. And so now we have to take that energy and we have to put it through the filter of society, right? The next part, the waning cycle, okay, which has to do with interactions in society. It has to do with crisis in consciousness. It has to do with sharing what we know, and then it has to do with the extracting of meaning from this whole experience. On the 11th, Mercury makes an ingress into Leo. And of course, the first degree of Leo is always a little disturbing for a lot of people. It says blood rushes to a man's head as his vital energies are mobilized under the spur of ambition. Remember, Leo has to do with ego. The eruption of biophysical energies into ego-controlled field of consciousness. The key words here is conflagration, right? Mercury moving into the self-expressive sign of Leo. This is expressing your will, but remember, okay, where is it here? Where's Leo? Mercury. I'm sorry, where's Mercury? Where's Mercury? Where are you? Oh my God, I can't believe I can't find it. I know it's here. Oh, there it is, Mercury here, right? Mercury is opposite Pluto. Mercury is also square the nodes of the moon here. The resolution node for Mercury square the nodes here is the North Node in Taurus, moving in the direction of stability, moving in the direction of the unknown future. Okay, so our mind needs to focus on the future, where our soul up here, the world soul, Pluto square the nodes of the moon, is focusing on our collective past, what we know about ourselves, and the relationship we have to power and powerlessness. Okay, the sun as the ruler of Leo is at 19th degree of Cancer. So the sun, where the sun is, influences this Mercury in Leo. And of course, Cancer is what Cancer is, very emotional sign. This is a little bit more emotional, or more perhaps emotionally driven than your average Mercury in Leo. And it says, a priest performing a marriage ceremony, the ritualization of productive interpersonal relationships, sanction. So this is a rite, a ritual to bring people together. Again, we have this energy of coming together to create, instead of creating problems, as we stand apart, coming together to create solutions. And that Mercury in Leo will hopefully help us do that. On the 14th, we have Sun making a sextile to Mercury. This is a waxing sextile. It's opening the lines of communication. We also have on that day Saturn making an inconjunct to Mercury. So whereas Uranus is bringing in all this new information, right? Opening us up, illuminating surprising things, right, that we didn't know. new information, whether it comes from our own higher self or from the collective, like, oh, this. We also have Saturn making an in conjunct to Mercury. So the Sun sextile Uranus, an affinity for making changes that liberate you from old restrictions in an integrative way that is not overly disruptive. Okay, so that's good. So that's Uranus and the Sun. Okay, Saturn in conjunct Mercury, putting your life in order will require exercising positive judgment on how to get the large projects you envision to manifest. The sheer scope of your goals in life can require more effort than is immediately obvious. Hard work can take its toll on your health. Correct partitioning of big ideas into segments that are achievable is one at a time. An exacting use of your time is a way to move forward while maintaining inner poise and outer health. So this is really about pacing yourself. And remember, Mars now, which is not necessarily connected to this, but Mars is in Virgo. So that's going to help. That's going to help us pace ourselves. We have to make sure we don't kill ourselves in the process of trying to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And actually, Mars is part of this, because you see here, Mars at 3 degrees of Virgo is actually opposing Saturn. And next week, I believe, is when it's exact, because let's just make sure. Yeah, so next week we have Mars opposing Saturn. That's happening on Thursday, the 20th, July 20th. So there is this need to pace ourselves, because there's this a need to be relentless in our progress, and yet still pace ourselves not to, because with Saturn in Pisces and Mars opposing it in Virgo, Pisces Virgo axis is the axis of health. So we have to be especially aware of how we're using our energy not to hurt ourselves in that way. Okay. All right. So this is next week. We're not going to look at this. So let me stop this share. All right. So that's the week ahead, guys. I hope you found this helpful. Please like and subscribe if you would. It helps me get my numbers up, and it helps me share more of what I know. If you would like to become a patron on my Patreon, there is a link below for that. That would really help. If you watch these all the time and you like $5, you can help support me. Again, I'm going through the same process as you are. Like all this stuff that I'm talking about is reflected in my life. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to support myself without killing myself, honestly, and sharing what I know and sharing what I feel in my heart of hearts is the thing that's going to help the most at this time in my life, and what I have available to share with you. So if you appreciate that and you want to support me through Patreon, that would be great. If that's not something that you can do, and I totally understand it, just give me the thumbs up and share, because sharing helps as well. So I do have, I'm doing a new series called Supreme Justice. I've already done Samuel Alito. You can find that on YouTube. I do have a Clarence Thomas on Patreon that will come out on YouTube next week. If you're a patron, you usually get things first, but I'd also like to create something else on Patreon, where if you're a student of mine and you want to study with me, we can make that an option on Patreon as well, but I can't do it until I actually get more support. So if you're a student of mine, or if you're an ex-student of mine, or if you want to continue to learn with me, we can actually do it through Patreon. And I think that'll be easier, because we'll have times when we can be together on Patreon. But then you'll also have the access to all the information that you need to do self-study. So that's what that's my plan anyway. We'll see how much I get done with that, but thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, and much love, everyone. Namaste.